Good evening, good day, wherever you might be listening to this, and welcome to another episode of the Longhouse, a show about art, history, culture, politics, etc., all with a true right Nordic perspective. Now today we're going a little bit back to our roots. We started this entire show off with a political overview and sort of post-World War II politics look at Norway, and then we have moved on to Sweden and Finland shortly after. But Denmark has been lagging a bit behind. But it's finally time to dig in and get to know our southern brothers a bit better. With me as always here I have Luddic Path. Welcome.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Always glad to be back. So we're finally completing the Scandinavian collection, unless we want to count Iceland, I suppose.
I have been getting some comments about trying to find people from Iceland, and if anyone know anyone who would be interested in doing
have you checked
that,
the YouTube analytics? Does Iceland show up at all in
it's
the
not large enough
for
that it's like giving me any numbers. No. It's only we're very strong in Norway, in the United States, and England, which makes sense, or the UK, I should say.
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, Iceland is like the population of they have 300,000 or something. It's not a very big. It's not a very big country.
It's not.
No, but it would still be interesting to get like one of their perspectives. I have no clue what's going on there or how they think about politics or.
Yeah, it would be interesting if possible. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so today our focus is supposed to be on Denmark, and with us here we have Jay Greenriver. Welcome.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes, of course, it's nice to have someone to be able to guide us from an insider perspective, of course. So that's no worries. I see a lot of the usual suspects in the chat. Monophthalmos, Herlock Sholmes, Nordanon, Burkarl is here, probably Groiping from Finland. I hope you all will enjoy the show tonight, and I think we should just start with some current events as we usually do. And now I'm gonna pull up the usual image here that we do. First off is a slightly local in terms of it's a Norway specific news story, but it has some interesting implications and observations, I think. Would you like to give the overview, Luddic, or do you want me to do it?
No, I could give a quick rundown of this story. So for those of you not familiar with Norway, like Tusenfryd, that means like 1,000 joys. It's a sort of theme park located close to Oslo. It's probably one of the bigger theme parks that we have, although that doesn't say much because Norway doesn't have a whole lot of theme parks in like this scale. I think you'd be much better off going to Sweden for that stuff.
Or even Denmark. Denmark has quite a few larger ones, yeah.
But they've been in the news recently because they've been introducing this kind of like VIP passes that if you pay extra, you basically get to skip in the line for rides, as far as I understood, and also just to get into the park. And this has just created such a like shitstorm in the newspapers. We have these whether it's journalists or people like non-journalists just submitting articles and they're just getting
social
published.
Media as well, yeah.
And I mean, I see it. It's just such an overwhelming feeling that people have about this. The idea that this is like the most unfair thing that ever happened since the mid-century German event almost.
And it is interesting because it's one of those things where I don't know if it's a cultural thing for like Nords or specific Norwegians, but there's something about the shared suffering of having to wait in line that you have to learn as a kid. But then when you grow up, I mean, in the rest of society, paying to skip in line is a feature that a lot of businesses use.
Yeah, so I mean, from my disposition, I wouldn't even have reacted to it if you came to me and said that, okay, they're bringing in the VIP pass, and I would ask you, I mean, this theme park has existed for quite a while, so I just ask why they didn't bring it in sooner. It seems like a very obvious kind of idea, and airports have this, and like concerts have this. Like you could probably think of more venues where you just pay to skip in line, or you pay for things to go faster. It's quite commonplace. But apparently, from like an optical standpoint, from this like Norwegian social democratic mindset, this is like the worst thing you can do. I do assume it has something to do with children being involved, that it's sort of affecting kids.
Yeah, it's, you're affecting kids and you're teaching them about the differences in economic status in society, etc., etc. And that probably leads into more spicier debates you can have about like demographics, etc. Right? So I think that's the shadow here. That if you start talking about children and what they can afford, you quickly get into like demographic debates, and that's something no one wants to touch with a 10-foot pole, as the Americans say. Yes. Or maybe that's the Brits.
And this having the significance that it has in the paper, it signalizes to me that we've kind of exhausted ourselves in the global narratives. So people are tired of COVID, and they're like tired of the Ukraine stuff. So now we have to bring it back to like this kind of more
back to the good old class struggle.
I'd almost forgotten about these types of things, because like ever since Trump came in, like, I mean, you had the migrant crisis, and you had the Trump, like, gay pride, COVID,
it's Ukraine. Been one thing after the other for quite a few years.
So I feel like we're like back to 2014 now, sitting and talking with like the social democrats versus the liberal conservatives on the school reform, and how this is a mentality, politically, that you see a lot as well in school politics, where they, the Norwegian school system and a lot of the sort of political lobby around that, they don't want to favor anybody. They would rather hold back the smart kids, so that you could have, as much of an even playing field for as long as possible within like the elementary school to the junior high and above and so on. So it's really like, it's a very kind of strong kind of emotional gut feeling thing that exists in Norwegians. But I mean, for me, this is just, it brings me back to when I used to be like the standard shitty, like conning liberal conservative guy. And I would sit and argue with people over stuff like this, why you should allow people to do this, and why you should allow the market to work, and so on. And like, I mean, I think we chatted about this previously, but the way I see it now is that the quote unquote, like the free market is sort of like a proxy for kind of like masculinity within certain groups. Like it's sort of an arena where you can express power and assert some dominance, and kind of take risks from like this very kind of masculine kind of white man perspective.
I mentioned Gordon Gekko when we were talking from the Wall Street movie, who I think is to some extent a bit of an archetype in
because there's a lot of people who look up to that, and a bit of that neoliberal promise was really the idea that we can take that masculine energy, and instead of going to war, you can go to war on the stock market, or you go to war in like the corporate sphere, and that's where you can express it. And I think because of that, like that's the reason that a lot of people like me end up on these like center right arguing for these types of propositions. But like with the changes, like since the 2000s with the woke capitalism, it's completely uninteresting. I have no interest.
I was talking about how strange it is that I can imagine multiple arguments for and against this, and I'll have no idea where I fit on the like traditional political scale when I say them, right? I can imagine myself making the, as you said, like the conning with the libertarian economical argument about how this is a private, company, and this park should be able to do what it pleases and let people vote with their wallets, right? But I could also say that these passes are bad because this park is owned by a Spanish multinational corporation, and I don't want our culture to be influenced, or the culture of our future children be influenced by a multinational corporation that has nothing to do with Norway. And you wouldn't know whether I'm a leftist or right winger when I say that.
That's
or I could even say, to get more spicier, I could say I want the lines to be separated, but I want them to be separated based on race. And you still wouldn't know if I'm being a leftist or a right winger in 2022.
Of course,
because I haven't told you which race.
The brown kids get in first or something. I assume. If you're explicit about the white kids getting in first, then I think they'd know. where you stand on that axis. But there's some things that.
But it just kind of like illustrates how weird things have become from the way we grew up with. As my point.
I mean, like this journey from like 2016 with Trump, and
yeah,
there we go.
Greenriver, did you have any comment to this while we're laughing at the memes?
Yeah, I was just laughing. But I think there is a role for the libertarian. You have this business owner, that the Henry Ford of the US, and you can say to some degree also Musk, right? You can channel into that, but with the woke capital, as Luddic Path said before, it's just impossible.
Yeah, it's not the same world anymore where that person can really exist, at least not on a scale where it actually has social impact. Despite you brought up Elon Musk, but even he has limits to his social power.
Yeah, we'll see how far he goes. There's Pride Month now, right? So I mean, you see, like he posted, Elon Musk posted on his timeline this meme with the Pride Month, where you have the meme with the guy that's standing with his face to the camera,
the
and there's the hurricane behind him, and there's like all of these rainbow logo companies inside the hurricane. But then people were like replying to his tweet with these kind of 2008, the Tesla is like the scores 100 out of 100 points on inclusion for LGBT people, and here's like a rainbow color Tesla and so on. So even he has to eat shit, basically. He can't just
toe the line, at least on a company level. Yeah.
So it's not the 80s anymore. It doesn't have that swagger. But like the kind of point that I feel is missed in the debates here, because you read the the standard kind of social democratic people who will write about this and condemn it with fury and anger, and then you have the Con Inc. types who try to make the arguments that, well, if you can buy a Tesla, then that's basically skipping in line, because in Norway the Teslas are allowed to use the kind of traffic lane for the collective travel, and you're allowed to skip in line with all this other stuff.
And until now, you have like a 25% off basically from buying it because there's no tax.
So there's a lot of these arguments that they make. I don't. There's one thing that's missing here, and it's really like the economy just getting worse, because I imagine the energy costs of running these theme parks has gotten, it's probably doubled with the energy prices in the Norwegian market, and I assume like, because this is such a bad thing optically, and this is not something that they've done in the past. They could have, made more money in the past doing this.
It kind of depends on how smart this company has been. I mean, because if I was running a theme park where pretty much everything I sell runs on energy, I would have fixed my price a long time ago, just in case something like this happened. But yes.
But of course, that's sort of what I'm assuming. I don't have any insight into the inner workings of this this company. I just assume that because the pricing has gone up and the economy is a lot tighter,
it's going to affect you regardless. Yeah,
that
and the inflation as well.
Okay, we can squeeze like these rich people. We can get something a little bit more out of them by offering them a little bit more service, right? Yeah. That was probably the idea in the boardroom when they came up with this stuff. And
probably, yeah.
Now they've had to retract it. Basically, that's as far as I understand. I even got ads.
They did a 180 in like 2 days or something.
Yes, they retracted it. But I assume that like the people, all these social democrat women on Facebook, they're still not going to go there, right?
No, they're probably going to hunt us to the ends of the earth.
Yeah, they'll never forgive them, right? Never forget hashtag.
Yes. Nope, we seem to have lost Greenriver here. We'll just keep going while we wait.
Go through the local news.
Yeah. The next one is actually a bit more interesting because it's a case of the cathedral in motion, so to speak. The Norwegian PA here has basically forced drug reform through at a legal level. Now, the drug reform has been a debate, quite a heated debate for the past, like, would you say like 2 elections or one, like the past couple of years?
Yes, it has. And I don't remember if it was Mongolian Doggerland or Herlock Sholmes that suggested this to me, but that I should do a stream where I do more research on the kind of drug lobby and how effective they've been disproportionately to the size and the people who are actually interested in this, because I don't I don't really. I mean, like you saw when this went up for the parliament, it got shut down basically by a majority vote. I think it was in 2001 or sort of 2021 or 2022. But it doesn't matter because like the public attorney just overturned it. Like they put in a new kind of guideline now that people who possess like, small doses, it doesn't matter what the drug is, if it's hard like heroin or if it's marijuana, you'll not be prosecuted if it's small enough to be considered personal use. And this is what the drug reform people wanted anyway. And it was voted down by a majority, but now it's basically like, okay, the public attorney just overturned it. I mean, I linked the document to you with the declaration for that. I don't know if you have the link on standby. Let's see. I could post it in the chat for those of you who are interested. I posted in the comments as well. Let's see. Are you muted?
Oh, I'm sorry, I muted myself. Yes, I'm working on it. Just go ahead and post it, and I'll see if I can pull that up on the screen as well.
I put it in the private chat, and it's in the it's in the comments as well, where you can see the decision was made, and there's a sort of note. It's almost like a 100-page document where they kind of justify how they got there and what the implication is.
Here, so you can download the documents here. Did you want me to pull up the documents as well, or just look at the judgment? I mean,
they're so massive, but you could read what the judgment says in general, and we could discuss a little bit around that.
Just gonna force this through a Google Translate, maybe. Nope. Okay. Does it have English? Here we go. That did not work. Okay. So we're going to have to do without. Maybe I can do... No. Okay. So basically this is talking about a reduced punishment, basically. And do you want to go into detail on each of these rulings, or...
I can't really. I haven't read through all of them. But I just sort of skimmed through the thing, and I mean, the general takeaway is just like I said, that it's basically a decriminalization for personal use. They're still going to pursue like dealers and I guess people who sell, and people who import larger quantities. But now,
so what it says is that there won't be meted out any punishment, even though the action is illegal. So basically, it can go against the letter of the law, but, we're just going to say that, nah, you're good, bro.
And if they do catch you, they're basically going to advise you to some kind of drug center or something where they're going to tell you, you're going to talk to some guy and he's going to tell you about the side effects, or they'll just send you some link about the document that you should read.
You get some drugs or bad MK lecturing.
Drugs or bad MK. Could you bring up the comment from Monopothalamus about Czechia?
In Czechia, they set the bar for personal use very high for various substances. It's essentially legalization. Now they flood the neighborhood in neighboring regions of Germany with meth. Right.
It's like the Czech Republic. It's interesting because I've talked about Asle Toje previously, kind of Norwegian political scientist, and he has that. He has like a book series that's the Red, White, and Blue, the Iron Curtain, and the gold, the game with the golden pieces. And in the Red, White, and Blue, all of these books, for those of you who are not familiar, he's kind of like this geopolitics, political science guy who travels around in Europe talking about, the state of things on the ground there. And he's coming from this kind of liberal conservative, tradition where he wants liberal conservatism or like liberalism to succeed, but he feels like it's just like Europe is just going towards like liberal failure, basically. They can't maintain liberal principles.
Everything can't be true all at once.
No,
basically.
But he in Red, White, and Blue, that's the first book in that series. He has a chapter on the Czech Republic, and it's basically just about like legalized methamphetamine and porn, where he sort of explains that because it's effectively legalized, they can make methamphetamine very easily. Like they go and buy cough syrup at the drugstore, and they can just with some very simple ingredients, you can create strong methamphetamine from that. So it's very easy to get. And he sort of believes that that's kind of one of the why so much of the sort of hardcore porn that's produced in Europe is produced in Chechnya, because he says that like methamphetamines and a lot of these substances, they basically work as sort of aphrodisiacs and painkillers for women. So like you have all these women in these porn movies who'll do all these sort of crazy stuff. You'll take on multiple guys in orifices where you probably should not.
You just
do this stuff,
the pain away,
and they're just drugged out of their heads. Basically, they're just completely like drugged out on meth. Usually, when they film this, and it's completely legal in that country, and that's why they that's how they pull it off.
Jesus.
But I mean, it is something to think about. Like when you see this kind of like porn sex, it's basically like how sort of methamphetamine addict imagines that sex is. Basically, it's. But yeah, enough about that. It's just a bit of an aside. But yeah.
Burkhall is posting in the chat that we should legalize it and subsidize it for a period of 5 years to make sure all junkies overdose, and then go to Singapore's line where you get redacted for 10 gold. For 10 grams, sorry, gold. I'm playing too much video games.
Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to make these people overdose. I'm surprised at the resilience of some of these junkies. They seem to just survive anything.
Yeah, I think that would be inadvisable as well from a culture is downstream from law perspective as well. I think legalizing things is inevitably going to lead to more of the thing, so it's better to not.
Yes, I believe that too. I've said it before, like this sort of argument that people are just going to do it anyway. This is something you say to win debates, but it's not actually
real.
True. It never manifests. I mean, to some degree, if you're going to try to have a complete zero tolerance, like extreme prejudice line on something, there are certain people who, it's true for some people that are very extreme, that are always going to try to get into, illegal stuff, or they're always going to try to smoke meth. But I think for most of the people that are kind of in the middle, the legality matters and the optics of doing it matters a lot more. So if you laws work and influence works. So I just do not believe in any case that like it's human nature is just like this unchangeable thing, and if you do just make everything legal, then people are just going to do what they were doing anyway. It's just a debate tactic.
Yeah, if I should, I am a libertarian, paleo-libertarian or something like that. The libertarian argument would be that, at least in many cases, that when you do legalize something, you can then take the resources that you have used to suppress it to prevent and repair, right? So in some cases, it will be better to remove the laws and then deal with the effects instead of trying to prevent it in terms of economic cost. I don't know if it's a good argument. I'm just saying that that's more how libertarians are thinking about it, at least.
That's fair, but it's also, it's, I don't know, I can't quite square that because it's like, oh yeah, you legalize it, but I don't mind because I'm not going to take the drugs. Like they're not going to have a negative effect on my life because I am quote unquote strong enough to be libertarian enough to resist it. But I mean, how many potential lives is like one bad trip on insert random drug here gonna ruin if the accessibility is increased?
Well, yeah, there are many factors that go into this stuff.
But I do understand the economics there, Greenriver. I can see the argument.
But that depends on the kind of libertarian one is, doesn't it? I mean, because you have to tax it then, or at least you get like 20%, 30% tax on the drugs, and you use that money to try to fix these problems.
Well, no, because you need people on the street and at the borders to patrolling, and maybe you need regulations on certain items that needs to be monitored in order to make sure that the cough syrup that you mentioned before isn't sold in large amounts or something like that. And that is a lot of resources that you put into banning something. Those resources could be put into preventing it instead. As a common advice, good advice.
put the money to border patrols and to make sure nothing enters your country, then it can be as free as you want.
Well, yeah.
I'm just joking a bit here.
Yes. But
Monophthalmos says, since we're already talking about junkies, has there been a significant increase in homelessness and begging in the Nordic countries too? I would say only for, like, I don't know about Denmark, Greenriver, but this is a Europeans ranting about Romani people moment. I think that's the only version I see, really. It was a period with a lot of, like, they were playing like the shittiest instruments trying to get money. I don't remember what songs and stuff they were playing, but they banned like Romani music, I think.
Yeah, I would actually say that there has been an increase, especially in the real cases, right? Where if I go back 10 years, it was those musicians you're talking about, or 7 years or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I remember now. They were all like sitting on corners playing like accordion music.
Yeah, what I'm seeing now in the last few years is that we're getting real ones in Denmark.
I'm sorry, I'm talking about gypsies, Nordanon. It's, yeah, you're right.
Yes, but so Greenriver, you mean like actual Danes that end up on the street because they can't afford any better kind of deal?
I'm not sure they're Danes, but they are maybe like Bosnians, etc., that had a hard time after the Civil War down there.
Yeah, I've actually dealt with some of those people myself. Not on the street, but in this kind of like low end rental markets, where you get a lot of those people who are like refugees from the Bosnian Civil War with hard PSTD. It can be quite a handful to deal with. As far as like the gypsies in Oslo, that seemed to be mostly kind of an Oslo problem, and it went away when they banned it. They just put a blanket ban on begging, which I really don't mind. I mean, I think it made things a lot cleaner in Oslo. I don't see, I mean, with the elaborate kind of welfare state that you have in Norway, there's really no reason why you should have to beg for anything. It's always kind of a lucrative opportunity. If you just allow people to do whatever they like, they're going to, run around trying to beg or something. So
there's considerable amount of money in it. It really is. And time again, it gets exposed that this is basically like a crime ring. Like, you give your money to these people and it just ends up back into the pockets of whoever owns them, whatever mafia runs this operation, and
it's like
people still give them money.
Thing.
So,
I imagine it's like a pimp thing almost. It's like they have these groups that are organized, and maybe they have like 12 beggars to a stable of 12 beggars that they just send out, and they send them back and they give them clothes or kind of like slice up the money the way they want to, like without too much insight, just intuitively. I imagine that's how it works. I'm just happy I don't have to deal with this on a regular basis.
Yeah, me too. It's died down quite a lot at least locally for me in the past couple of years. Now, we've wasted almost half an hour talking about, well, it's not waste, but I would like to get into talking about Denmark here. Greenriver, why don't you take it away, and we'll interrupt you when we got any questions. I'll share my screen here because you had a couple of images you wanted to share.
That sounds great. So let me get started on that. Well, to start with, we should focus on the history just to understand where Denmark is coming from. And I know we said that it had to be post World War II history, but I have to start before that. And we have to start with the Anglos burning down the Danish fleet back in the Napoleonic Wars. And then they backstabbed us once again with the negotiations regarding Norway. And then again, later on in 1864, when we got into a war with the Prussians and our allies, the Anglos, call them allies one more time, didn't show up. And that resulted in Schleswig-Holstein getting lost from Denmark. So after that, Denmark decided no more, we are not a great power anymore. And we went into like a golden, romantic, nationalistic golden age or something like that. And we reinvented ourselves like a small, neutral, peaceful state full of traders and farmers. And then some 70 years later, we woke up and there was like 50,000 German soldiers on the streets. Nobody really knew where they were, and for 2 years, nobody really cared. There was some recruitment posters, and there was some kids throwing stones at the soldiers, but otherwise, nobody really cared that they were there. But then the establishment, the Danish government, etc., realized that the Germans were going to lose this. So they started organizing it. They started some sabotage actions and some propaganda flyers, etc. And we started getting some retaliations from the
So is this Germans. Like during World War II or after?
Yeah, during World War II. And by the end of the war, the sentiment against the Germans had gotten to the point where
how would you say, do you have any info on how the relationship, like you said, people didn't care, but how was the relationship with between Denmark and Germany before? Because from our previous coverage with Norway and Germany, it was quite amicable, and a lot of people looked up to Germany in those years.
Yeah, so the situation was that the government at the time, which was a social democratic government, had the attitude that Denmark could do absolutely nothing against the Germans if something were to happen, if they invaded. So they made military reforms that reduced the funding. I mean, the general attitude was that nothing could be done. So there was no reason to try funding it. So they just tried to stay on good footing with the Germans. And then the opposition was screaming at them, but had no success in trying to raise an army or something like that could actually fight the Germans. But it would have been pointless if they tried. So we knew it was coming from the day that Hitler came in. We knew there was a risk, but we decided just to be on good footing with the Germans.
Now, Monopothamos in the chat here says that half of Denmark's ministries were administered in Germany until 1864, if he remembers correctly. So you must have had some sort of relationship with Germany before the 1900s that was at least friendly, which is the same image I seem to have of Norway as well.
No. Oh, he's talking about the language German.
Ah, okay.
They were, much of the government infrastructure was in Danish until very late. I don't know if it was 1864, but yes, we spoke German to a high degree in a high level.
Yes. Again, that mirrors a lot of the things I've seen about, like, scholarly or academics in Norway usually worked in German because they had studied in Vienna or something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, keep going.
Yeah. To get back, by the end of the war, the sentiment against the Nazis was very high. Very high. It was a lot higher than we started. So that we actually managed to have a 50,000 man large militia standing ready to go into Germany around the time where Germany actually surrendered. So it was too late, but we were starting to get into the fight, you could say. Now, all of this, or perhaps we should rather say how little we actually did, had the effect on our establishment afterward, that they were kind of embarrassed. So we were one of the first to go into UN, we were one of the first to get into NATO, and every other global homo Great American Empire organization you can think of. We have been among the first ever since, and we are definitely one of the leading gay nations out there. So let me give you some examples of that, just so you can understand that we're just a gay super state or whatever you want to call it. Yeah,
sure.
Okay. Yeah,
so I just wanted to ask, well, maybe it's better to talk about that afterwards, because you sometimes hear, these days, people like always dunk on Sweden for all the problems they have put themselves in, and they usually use Denmark as like, oh yeah, but Denmark's actually doing kind of base stuff when it comes to immigration, etc. Is that actually like in reality true?
So I think there's two things here. What I'm saying is that our establishment is first in compared to Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
However, the population is much more slow in adapting what is happening, including the top 10%.
So it's kind of like the UK then, in a sense, or like England, I suppose, if I should be specific.
Yes, and you will see some references or some similarities to the UK play out later on as I explain what is going on. That it's a very good example. We are very much like the UK in that way. But just to get back to those example of things where we are in front, Denmark is roughly 40% of the population of Sweden, but we have 2 to 3 times more soldiers deployed in various war zones across the world. So that makes us one of the nations with the most soldiers per capita deployed in foreign war zones. So you can say we are one of the leading neocon nations, if you want to frame it like that. And of course, since I'm a dissident, this is of course an embarrassment, right? I must admit that, but it is true. Regarding the immigration, you brought that up before. I will get into that a little bit later, but perhaps we could take it after I've done the presentation.
Sure.
I think that makes sense. All right. So another example is, of course, Trump, that when he wanted to make a deal regarding Greenland, Denmark replied that there was not going to be a chance in hell for that to happen. And immediately after Biden wins, those rights that Trump was after was handed over to Gates. It was like a company that they have made together.
Oh, really?
Bill Gates, Bezos, etc. Yeah.
So hang on, is there
Greenland
anything,
has already been sold?
Is there anything like resource-wise on Greenland? I'm not very very learned on this topic.
There's gold and there's gold, and there's what are they called? Rare earths, and they're gonna look for diamonds and all.
Okay, so there was actually something to Trump and other people wanting Greenland. It's not just a meme.
Yes, for sure. No. He wants all the wealth under the ice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So what have happened is that Greenland have been sold in the more traditional way that the gay operates, right? Not in the Trump way. So in that way we have sold it. But
so what you're saying, then, just to be perfectly clear, that Greenland is effectively already sold, but just to like a subsidiary of William Fence.
I don't know if the whole thing has been sold, but the right to excavate what they find with a survey teams, etc., has basically been sold. Of course, they will have to negotiate the rates of how much tax they're going to pay the Danish government or Greenland administration. But
so what do you think William Fence wants with this stuff? Is it part of some idealistic project, or is he just trying to make himself richer?
No, it's a mineral exploration. He's looking for all the good stuff.
All right.
That's what he's there for. It's natural resources.
Semiconductors.
Yeah, that's it.
Yep.
And that is also why the US was in Afghanistan, right? And it's also why they supported Kosovo, right? It's for the natural resource extraction. So it's exactly the same with Greenland. We're sold in the same way. Of course, it's only exploration right now. They have to find something before they can truly sell it, but it's already that way. Then we had COVID, of course. We were one of the first nations. We locked down hard, but we didn't lock down like Australia. We just told the population that they had to stay indoors or advised them to do it. We didn't hand out fines or anything like that. We did do it a little bit for something like nightclubs, etc. But otherwise, people just stayed indoors. They didn't have to do the draconian Australian method in Denmark. We just did it ourselves.
I think that's something that seems to echo across a lot of Scandinavia, is that, you know, people were just told to stay home and they pretty much just did, or, you know, we live in such a way where that's easy to do. And so people just, like, you know, pretty much just went about their day, but being slightly more antisocial than we usually are.
Exactly.
And then 2 years later, the government is like, oh, well, COVID is over now. And then we went, all right, which is, you know, scary in its own right, I guess.
There's a great deal of like what I would call gay envy in like the Norwegian media and the Norwegian elites. You know, like whatever country, if it's Denmark or Sweden or in the Scandinavia that's jumping on the gay project first, they usually have a lot of this kind of, oh, we should be like that, you know. And that's been Sweden for a long time because they were getting onto a lot of these multicultural projects. But during COVID, I remember reading Denmark was in the news because they, you know, we should do what they're doing. Basically, we're too slow in rolling out lockdowns, and look how efficient and quick Denmark has been. Look how hard they're locking their people down. I don't know if you remember that, Walrus.
I don't remember specifically Denmark. I remember... No, actually, I do remember, because this was like very early. Because this was back when, because Norway has been taking a lot of, or at least early on, took a lot of its cues from the UK on lockdown, and they were very like waffly in the first couple of months. And a lot of, as you said, Luddic, a lot of commentators were like, well, Denmark is already, you know, cracking down. We should do like Denmark, etc., etc.
Exactly. So while all of that COVID nonsense was going on, we also had one of history's largest genocides, namely the extermination of millions of minks in tens of millions of minks.
Because the minks got COVID or something, right?
Yeah, they found 2 positive tests, so we killed 10 million minks or something like that. And then we then put them into mass graves.
Yeah,
this is even more excellent. We put the minks we genocided there. We put them into mass graves, and then they realized that if you put that many bodies into the ground, it will start forming gases that are dangerous. So they dig them up. And then they spread them out in new graves. Then they found out that the same problem was still around, so they had to dig them up a second time, and then they burned them.
Well, at least it created a lot of jobs.
We did. We really managed to
strong economy out of the COVID crisis. That's a good.
So just to be fair to the Danish government, it was in sections that this happened.
So when you're telling that, it sounds like something that Anders Thomas Jensen could have directed as a comedy movie.
Yes, it is in that level. However, it is in sections because it was not all the minks that actually got genocided in the end. It was not all of the minks that was digged down to begin with. Even some of them.
Nordanon asks, right. Nordanon asked, "What's wrong with you people?" I don't think Nordanon has. I don't. Do you have any experience with working with state departments, Nordanon? This is just how it works. I don't think this is specifically a Danish thing. This is just modern bureaucracy at its finest.
Yeah. It's the modern bureaucracy. So. That's what we do in Denmark. We genocide minks. That's one of our big things. But besides that, as a primary Great American Empire nation ally, or whatever you want to call it, we also run the biggest shipping company in the world. Most of the river transport in the US, which is the largest river transport system in the world, is largely controlled, but not always owned by Maersk. We also run most of the biggest container ship, the really big container ships from China and that sells between China and the West. That's Maersk as well. And Maersk is, of course, also into gas and oil.
Right.
So that's a very important part that we have as a part of the Great American Empire. That is, we are the shipping company. So, yeah. Now, this is just example of I've listed 4 examples here of what we do for the gay, and it really, when you look at our history, we are just the first in Scandinavia to join, and then the rest joins, and then we do all of these things for gay.
We have joked earlier about the eternal Viking merchant from a Norwegian perspective before, but I think of course it applies to the Danes as well.
I would say that is correct, and like, not only have we been caught selling weapons and other forbidden materials to all the wrong nations like Iran and so on, but our banking sector just prior to COVID was shaken by the revelations that we had been laundering gigantic amounts of Russian money. So not only are we probably the biggest weapon smugglers in the world, we are probably also the biggest money launderers. But right. I mean, some people talk about one tribe, I talk about another tribe in this case, right? Details. Yeah, so I mean, we could go over the years for when the different things happened when we joined the UN, etc. But I find that there's nothing much to say in regards to that. Mm-hmm. It's just more. What is important here is more that we are the primary. We are primary ally of the gay.
But would you say it's sort of like a survival tactic, or is it just something that the people, quote unquote, like you're in spirit, just kind of slotted into?
Yeah. So first of all, we don't have a choice. If we weren't this ally, we would lose Greenland very fast.
Right.
So we have to be that ally. That being said, I also think that our elite is strongly connected to the UK, and the UK elite is strongly connected to the US. So in that way, it's also just natural for us to be a primary gay ally.
It would be very difficult, I think, geographically for Denmark to do anything else. Like you said, if you wanted to be allied with one of these BRIC countries, whether it's China, Russia, or something, you're just not located in a very good spot to, because you'd have all these other gay countries surrounding you anyway. It's
but we could be more neutral, like Sweden, Finland, Denmark, right, and then Poland perhaps too. We could be like a little bit more neutral, and we are not. We are first, right? I mentioned this later, but when Iraq was invaded, there was 4 allies that went in first. Denmark was one of them, along with the UK and the US, and I can't remember. I think was the last one like Spain or something like that. But we were among the first 4 that went into Iraq, and then 30 others followed up afterwards. So we could be more neutral, but we are not.
Well, I mean that I think mirrors Norway to a certain extent. Maybe we are a bit more free at certain areas, but I mean we have also embedded ourselves heavily in all of the large organizations as well.
Yeah.
We certainly have. It's interesting for me to hear these things, because like Denmark has fallen a bit under the radar in terms of how they connect with the kind of gay system. And like you say, like these having all the soldiers and the shipping and stuff, that it's a part of the gay, but it's not gay in another sense. It's a little bit more macho actually than the way that Norway interacts with this system.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like there's a lot of emphasis in Norway on this kind of soft power angle, and charity and being a part of NGOs, and like really trying to have this very good image that's a part of how we
getting people
sell ourselves
into NATO positions and UN positions, and will sell ammunitions under the table.
Yes,
exactly. That was also what we wanted to do when the Anglo came in during the Napoleonic Wars. We wanted to sell weapons to both sides, but no, we were not allowed to do that. Anyways, I think actually that covers our history, so I think we should just move on to we could talk a little bit about that we have always been like, was it Nordanon that pointed out that Denmark has always been very friendly to gays. He says here.
Denmark
exactly.
isn't just a GAE ally, they're a gay ally too. They decriminalized sodomy in 1933. Norway didn't do this until 1972.
And that new movie about, it's not new, it's probably 5 years old now, where there was a man who was trans in the 40s or something like that, or 20s or something like that.
Right. Probably full of a lot of mid-century Germans too.
Yeah, that was a Danish woman that was focused, right?
Right.
So yes, he's right about that. I also saw that Birkal mentioned Christiania, and if you don't know what Christiania is, it's left libertarian small part of Copenhagen there, where the left libertarian have been allowed to make what you saw in the US, like a free zone or whatever they called it over there.
Oh, it's what you call it, like a narco-communist zone.
Yeah, exactly. It's not very large. There's only a few thousand people living there. The key thing about it is that you were able to buy drugs there, and the police wouldn't interfere with it for a long time. But I think it's back in the mid-00s they started taking another stance on it, which meant that all the drugs flowed out into the city instead and was sold through small bars, etc. So they didn't actually manage to stop the drug trade despite banning it. It just flowed out into other parts of the city. So now you got more serious crime happening,
right,
in the rest of the city, because now people would be lured into areas where they didn't know what would happen and then get robbed, etc. So I don't actually want to counter signal you, Luddic Path, because I largely agree with you, but I think there's some places where you have to consider the consequences of banning something, and I think when it comes to things like drugs, you're better off making monopoles on it, so it's controlled.
Yeah, there are a lot of angles to it. I mean, I'm not like some sort of diehard anti-drug person, but like my general idea is just that I mean, if stuff is less accessible, then it's less used. But of course, I mean, if you have like one part of it where like there's kind of an overflow of this, and you make some new law in there and you just move it out, then yeah, of course I agree with you that this is just going to, like, I prefer predictability over over like logical consistency in that kind of sense. I don't have like one simple answer to how this should be done. I just think that if things are made more available, then it's just going to be be used more. That's all I'm going to say on it.
Yeah,
and there's a difference,
that's
you know, as you said, with predictability. There's a difference between legalizing something and, you know, controlling the flow, so to speak. What we're talking about when we talk about legalizing is basically allowing people to literally just do what they want whenever they want. And that's gonna.
Academic Agent at one point talked about the benefits of having a mafia. What's it called in English?
Right,
Mafia,
his mafia, was the mafia actually good or something from an economic perspective video.
Yeah, like you could see the benefits of having a mafia control it rather than
I actually
than letting
like
things flow. But
it's a weird.
That's a good idea.
Weird sort of counters. It's such a weird position to argue. I assume like he took some, like the Academic Agent took that, like, is that the book Freakonomics or something that talks about the hidden benefits of a lot of these like mafia economies and stuff. But
yeah, it could be from there. I can't remember.
With stuff
that
like
does sound like something that's in
these,
Freakonomics.
Slightly kind of illegal things. I do certainly see the benefits of having some other power center other than the state being an actor that could influence things. And I mean, this is kind of a nice segue to one of the questions that I wanted to ask you. And I go back to like Asle Toye, where he had a chapter in the book Red, White, and Blue about Denmark. And he talks about, you know, he's a lot more positive towards Denmark than a lot of other countries because he believes that they've been able to make integration work better and to make immigration work better. And he actually credits like the Danish biker gangs for being able to shift the needle on immigration policy, which is something interesting. Is that something you can verify?
I'm gonna say that we might have done it better here, but I don't think it has succeeded any better here than, let's say, Sweden. We just don't have the same numbers yet.
And that's the thing that you hear, that Denmark has been a lot stricter on immigration, a lot stricter on integration, etc. as well. When you hear about it in the news, it's something that's flying under the radar that Norway has actually had quite strict immigration policies, like relatively. I'm saying, I think still the numbers have been a bit too high, but
you have been around the same numbers as Denmark, I think, a little bit below, so. Perhaps even. Yeah.
But we are a smaller country, so in terms of population numbers, there's some rules about like percentages based on population numbers, etc. So
okay, well, regarding the biker gangs, it is true that the biker gangs embraced the foreigners initially, but now they have their own gangs. So it might just have been a period of time where they were integrated into the biker gangs that he's talking about. Do you remember when that book was from?
He talked about how there would have become a split as there came more immigrants into Denmark, that it split into like the Moroccans basically as like a large part of the immigration, that there have been sort of Moroccan drug gangs that got into rivalries with more of these ethnically Danish biker gangs. And like this turned into, you know, basically politics where people were writing about it in the newspapers, and some of the leadership within the biker gangs were able to get articles published where they talked about like their views on how destructive some of these Moroccan drug gangs were for Denmark, and how, you know, how it was important to preserve certain freedoms. So, like I can't redo the argument exactly, but like that was part of pushing the popular opinion in a certain direction, which I thought was interesting, because this is something like that I think is underestimated, being able to have like a large something in your country that is like ethnocentric, like a biker gang or like a little mafia or something like that can actually push the needle on certain topics. I think that's probably might be even more effective than like the Conservative Party in terms of being able to
have a bit
pressure.
of like a raiding party that you can do. I mean, you want your right-wing Antifa. That's what you're talking about, really.
That's kind of what I'm talking about.
I can tell you they're gone now. There's no biker gangs left. They are being subsumed by the immigrant gangs now.
Well, the book was like 10 years old, so it was a sad ending to to the story.
No,
but it is. I don't. Yeah.
They still exist, but they're nothing like they were, like, let's say 10, 15 years ago or 20 years ago.
But why do you think that happens? Is it because they get disproportionately policed compared to the biker gangs, or is it that like ethnic Danes don't want to join these things anymore?
No, I think the amount of misfits in Danish society is so small that they are not able to compete in numbers. The ethnic gangs is much larger. So
yeah, I think so. I mean, if the immigration continues, and that's kind of inevitable at some point, and some of the like more of this right-wing energy goes online rather than into these more physical spaces. I mean, in Norway, it's been basically almost impossible for any kind of like large right-wing organizations to exist because the government have been so gung-ho on cracking down on them.
Yeah, I remember those like what were they called a couple of years ago? Like semi-biker guys who were like patrolling the streets. The Sons of Odin. Remember those?
Yeah, like the Raven soldiers or something, where they
something like that. Yeah. They were cracked down pretty hard and pretty quickly, despite them actually not getting into any trouble at all.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter how, as long as you like, if you show up with leather jackets and some like stitched in symbol.
Yeah, I was going to say their optics were pretty bad, let's be honest, but
you proclaim some kind of like ethno-nationalist stuff, it will just be cracked down on super quick. And it's something that I come back to. I mean, because I was looking at some of these like older Grey Mirror posts where I think Moldbug had a post where he was talking about Anders Behring Breivik, and like the part of his manifesto where he talks about like being a kind of youth in Oslo in the early 2000s, and like the sort of concentration of these immigrant gangs. And he said that the dynamic was basically if you tried to counter-organize as a sort of ethno-nationalist, like this sort of ethnically Norwegian gang, it was just cracked down on like immediately. So they were able to, like the immigrants were able to kind of form these kind of, these type of smaller mafias that were super dominating because they were not cracked down on in the same way that these kind of ethno-nat, these sort of implicitly ethno-nat alliances were.
Yeah, I recognize that pattern in Denmark too. Oh, well, should we get on to some...
I think we should get on. I will say before we go on, I'll do a moment of advertising here that with this image up next week here on the Longhouse, we're going to do meme review for the first time. And if you're interested in having your memes submitted, I suppose, you can join the Matrix community we have for the Longhouse in the link down below. I also have a subscribe star that is where the proceeds are intended to go for the development of the show in any way possible. So if you like what we're doing here, you can consider donating a couple of dollars per month. I have started doing a thing where I will preview or share transcripts for videos I do before they're released, so you can get sneak peeks of things I'm working on, or actually full access before I publish it to YouTube. But that is, I think, mostly for the higher tiers for $10 or $15. But if you go to the Matrix channel, there should be a memes channel. If you have anything you want us to look at next week, post it there and join in on the fun. All right, I think we should keep going.
All right, so in Denmark we have 4 levels of governance. We have the EU, and then we have the national government, and then we have the regions, and we have city councils or town municipalities. What I just want to point out here is that we have absolutely no influence in the EU. We control 12 out of 705 members. The the regions controls the collective transportation and healthcare, and then the town council controls stuff like parks and local schools and the streets in the city itself, right? But intercity transportation is handled by the regions.
Right.
So we have 5 major parties in Denmark who has had a lot of influence in the last 20 years or so. The first one is Venstre. It's the party of the farmers, the entrepreneurs, and business in general. You have a party in Norway called Venstre too, but it's not the same party as this party.
No, Venstre here is like a liberal party in every sense of the word except economical, I feel.
Yeah. So we also have the sister party to that in Denmark. So maybe I should just clarify that, because a sister party is when you have 2 or more parties that are the same entity, but they're represented in different countries. So in Norway and Denmark, there is a lot of overlap with sister parties. Whereas if you look on Norway-Sweden or Denmark-Sweden, then there's a lot of alliances between parties, but it's not the same as sister parties. And that's because Norway and Denmark has a long history together. So we have a lot of ties in that regard. I don't know if you talked about that in your Norway stream.
I don't think we mentioned any other Scandinavian parties, did we, Luddic?
Yeah, I mean, we had Emil on. So you talk more about this kind of like wacky, stram kurs with the Paludan, the Quran burner guy. But I think that's as close as we got to any other parties.
Okay, well, just to continue with Venstre here, they control about 20% of the spots across all types of government. They have also spawned the most important man in Denmark, Anders Fogh Rasmussen, which I will get to later at the end, because there's a lot to say about him. Venstre is also connected to a think tank called Cepos, who has a lobbying office in DC, among other places, and they make a lot of waves internationally too. So they are actually a pretty good think tank, but if when they look at immigration, they might encourage immigration, but they won't do, that kind of thing where they say all immigration is good immigration. They would say, if we only take the highly skilled and the scientists and the engineers, etc., these are good, but the rest we can't take. So Cepos is good in that way.
Right.
And it actually has quite a lot of influence both in Germany and France and the UK. They listen to it as well. So this party has just recently got a new, 4 years ago or 3 years ago or something like that. They got a new leadership, and it's still not good, but it's like DeSantis for the Republicans, right? It's an improvement to what is there, but it's not good. But it's something to look at.
You mentioned DeSantis. I mean, are we talking the same kind of rhetoric here that DeSantis at least publicly spouts, or?
I would say he's halfway there, but it's still not good.
No.
And the new leader is a son of a former foreign minister in Denmark. So again, there's a little hope that he knows the game, etc. So there's not much more to say about that party right here and now. 20%. Mm-hmm. Then we have the Conservative Folkeparti. They have they have an actual sister party in Norway. It's your party known as Høyre.
Yep. So these are this is Con Inc. then for Denmark.
Yes, Con Inc. Yes, exactly. And I mean, these two parties are sharing party programs, etc. So you know them already.
Yes, I slightly know them already. I do remember seeing some videos of these two parties having sort of like meetings at some point.
Yeah. They meet to make sure that they are aligned, and that they won't break apart. Right? They have a common strategy.
Do they have a common think tank or some third organization that they both refer to, or is it just a kind of partnership?
No. They are the same organization. That's the thing with the sister parties. They are the same organization. It's just the same organization since two different nations.
Right.
How tight would you say that coupling is? I'm just
99
thinking out loud here. Yeah,
99% with the sister parties. And it's also the ones called Moderaterna in Sweden. It's the same. Yeah, that's also a sister party.
The moderates,
And it's the same. And they borrow party programs from each other, copy paste. It's that level we're talking about.
Sure. I'm having a Dark Lord moment here, but I'm sure if we look into who writes those programs, we're going to find some familiar names.
Possibly. Originally, they came with it was like the King, Fatherland, and God motto, right? That this party run with, and they are Bergians. At least on paper.
Doesn't seem to be the case anymore.
No. I was just about to say that if we take one of the leaders from here, she said that the party was now standing for the royal family, the state church, the public state schools, and the defense.
Interesting.
Which is quite different from King, Fatherland, and God, although I can see that there is some overlap. But
it's a very smart rewording of it, because it grants them a lot more wiggle room while at the same time sounding like they're the same people.
Yeah. I have seen sometimes they have good conservatives on the local level, in my experience. But they are liberals, right? They just are. Nowadays, they're sitting on 7.5% of the votes across all four things. But they used to be much more important. Like they have been up around 20% within the last 20 years. So but right now
they're pretty much been pushed out. That's a difference from
right at the moment they're pushed out. They had two leaders that one after another was arrested for drunk driving, and that killed their ratings. So the last 10 years they've been struggling.
Well, that's interesting, considering that the right here has been in power for the past 10 years, basically. So I say the right, but I mean that's the name of the party.
Fair enough.
But their sister party here has been in power the last 8 years.
No, that's not the case here. Not at all. Yeah. The last 3 years we have had the Socialdemokratiet, which are Social Democrats. It's not the US kind, of course, but they do share some similarities. The big thing about the Socialdemokratiet in Denmark is that they changed their stance on immigration back in 2017. They were pro-immigration back then. Now they are on paper anti-immigration, but they have been caught multiple times saying that it's a facade they're keeping up. They also communicate with the German left wing through think pieces, outlets, journals, etc., where they have laid out the strategy. And they don't use the word facade, but they are saying, we're saying one thing to the public, but actually doing something else, right?
Interesting.
So it's just straight up lying, and that's also how they won the government, because they are in power now, the Socialdemokratiet.
Contained. #contained.
Yeah, #contained. People haven't really realized that this is what they're doing. But if you are looking at the immigration, then it is better than Sweden and Germany. And I heard yesterday that there was a fella who told me that the German left wing is actually criticizing the Danish left wing because of this immigration stance. So
it feels a bit like operating on the same. I mean, I know it's a social democrat stuff, but it seems like a lot of the Blair era types of things where you look tough, but in reality you're basically just pushing in lefty policies.
Exactly. And I think the stance among the population is that we cannot have more immigration in general. But and that plays out at the voting booth, so they have to do this on the left wing, right?
Yeah.
In order to get in. But it is a tightrope that they are walking between the population and then the international alliances that they have right at the same time. So they have to try and navigate that.
But at least they are in contact with reality, right? Because you see the trend now is for like this complete reality denialism from certain politicians. They're not even interested in trying to, okay, we have to just give them a little salami, a little piece of meat with the immigration or some other stuff, at least so we can stay in power. They just go full like pause on every issue, not interested in even negotiating it.
Yeah. In that way, they're interesting as a kind of political realist on the left. They are currently leading a minority government, and they're the only party in the administration. And then they make deals with other parties, like even opposition parties on the so-called right-wing side of things. And so they just push whatever they want through and make the deal with the party they need to make it happen with. And sometimes they have to compromise a little bit. They have about 30% of the votes. So just with the three parties mentioned this far, we have counted up to about 60% of the votes in total.
So is this a regular coalition then? These three?
No.
Okay.
It's a minority. It's a minority government with Socialdemokraterne as the only one.
Uh-huh.
And then they make deals across the ISIL.
I see. Okay.
To get what they want. But they can make deal with the whole spectrum, right? So they can get whatever they want. With some minor compromises. They don't need to compromise that much to get the policies through. But they have placed themselves as a center party, center left party, right? Okay, so what's next here? There has been some talk about Venstre and Socialdemokraterne allying up to make like the perfect Blair alliance across the middle, where they would control more votes than they needed to get all policy proposals through. But the two parties has been historic rivals, so it's probably not gonna happen. But it's an interesting option. Yes. So the next party, that is the Radikale Venstre. That is the sister party to your Venstre. So that's the Liberal Party.
The radical
they are currently
left.
sitting on 7.5%. Yes, it's the radical left. There's not much to say about it. You also know them as Norwegian. It's the same party program.
Yeah, the way you describe them here sounds like the guys we described as the left. Because we have someone called the socialist left, but they seem to be a lot more, again, tanky than what these people seem to be.
So is there anything radical about them at all?
Yeah. No. I mean, radical. Compared to there's no radical change. No, there's not.
And what's the B?
As I've described them here, they are moderate. Oh, sorry, what?
The B.
You fell out from
the letter.
That's B just the B is the. Yeah. So political parties in Denmark have a letter that you like a logo or something, just a letter instead, and then so V was already taken. I think R was already taken when they formed the party. So they just took the next one that wasn't taken in the list, and that was B. So A is the Social Democrats, B is the Radical and Left or Liberal Party.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then I have it's confession time, right? I voted once for this party at age 18 or 19. It was one time.
I can see it if you're like young and you want the it's sort of like a slightly libertarian sounding proposition, isn't it?
I can explain why I voted for. At the time, I was involved in student politics, and this party had the best education in politics. Which,
okay.
If I look at it today, it just meant more money into education, and I was involved in student politics, so that's why I voted for them.
Well, fair enough. I've voted worse, probably. So.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
so the next one
it's based self-interest, right? There's nothing wrong with that in my view, and like we talked about previously with the theme park stuff. From like the dissident perspective, you get in so many like weird conundrums about like what party you should vote for, or it's not so obvious that the furthest right party formally is like the best party to vote for at all, like from our perspective. I think I talked to Walrus about this previously, but next election I actually consider voting for like the red party, like the Norwegian, the communists, because their leader actually went out and said that he was like against Sweden and Finland joining NATO,
and they're standing strong on that. Yes. Actually,
they're the only party that didn't cock on that stuff. So they're basically like. It's the
they had like a ton of like hit pieces written about them in the media.
So they're anti NATO, and I was watching a lot of videos on these events of like the Norwegian kind of like right wing parties, like the Norwegian Democrats, the True Christian Party, and the Progress Party, where they get together and they discuss stuff, and like. The only thing they discuss is Israel. Basically, they talk about Israel. Oh, it's so great! It's like the most fantastic country in the world. And, all these people like the Reds. They just want to bomb Israel. They just want to send money to Palestine, these Palestinian organizations, to bomb Israel. It's like I was just thinking, okay, so they're going to do that, and they're going to say no to NATO. I was like, maybe I should reconsider my choices here.
Yeah.
At least it's a little bit like a chaos element that you can actually throw into the government that'll counter signal some of these gay positions. So just so you know that you're subverting the system, I'm not actually supporting the spirit of what they're doing, but the letter of what's happening right now. It's I kind of like it actually.
Yeah. So the last big party, that is the Danish Folkeparti or Dansk Folkeparti. It's the equivalent of AFD in Germany and Sverigedemokraterne i Sverige. They have, of course, been railed in.
Okay, so these are the sort of new emergent right anti-immigration party. Is that it?
No, they have already. They are the containment now.
Okay.
So what happened was, and the same happened with the Sverigedemokraterne and AFD. What happened was that back in the 00s and the early 10s was that all of these parties that you hear about that on the surface looks good, they are told at one point or another that if they don't adhere to the mainstream policies, then they will never get power, and then they are held out of power.
That's interesting because I think it was last week, Luddic, we talked about the internal struggles of the Democrat Party in Norway, which is one of the furthest right-wing parties we have, where they had shot down a proposition of declaring themselves explicitly as anti-racist.
Yeah, and
indicating,
then
of
they
course,
get
that they're not
reasons.
interested in towing the line.
Exactly, and those parties are held out of power, and
Yes.
until they give up on those stances, they are not allowed into power. They're not even allowed into committees, etc. They're just held out of politics. So it doesn't matter if you have 5 or 10 or 20% of the votes. You're just held out.
In the well, I'm probably going to dox myself a little bit here, but close to where I live, the party I was talking about did win in the local elections quite a majority of the votes last cycle. And what happened was pretty much every other party, got together to make sure they were held out of local power as much as possible.
Yeah.
Regardless of their previous beef. The defeating these people was more important than whatever disagreements they have.
Yeah. So what you're describing is just what have happened with Sverigedemokraterne, AFD, and Dansk Folkeparti. It's the same that is happening everywhere, and these parties, AFD, Sverigedemokraterne, and Dansk Folkeparti, those have agreed to the rules. They are now playing by the rules. So they are now allowed into power, and that goes for Sverigedemokraterne, AFD, and Dansk Folkeparti. So they are now the containment parties. They are right at the edge where you're allowed to be without getting constant hit pieces, without being held out. Now, right now, this party is only sitting on 5%, but they used to sit up on up to about 25% of the votes in Denmark. But people have realized that they are containment. That's why that it has sunk away. Some have driven into Venstre. Others have gone to some of the more far-right parties that is starting to pop up. I'll get to them later. But first, there is four small left-wing parties. It's Enhedslisten, it's Alternative, it's the Free Greens, and it's Socialistisk Folkeparti. How to translate social folk
People's Party.
People's Party. And there's a lot of green and reds in those, as you can mention. One of those, Alternative, has tech people. Like, I wouldn't say there's any Elon Musks, because Elon Musk is, of course, American and huge.
Are these guys like transhumanists?
Yeah, some of them are, and they want to look at how to transform society in a better direction, but not like the Reds.
Right.
The last one, Socialistic People's Party, is almost full-on teachers and pedagogues. So it's almost a professional party, a profession party, right?
Do they have like connections to unions or something like that?
Yeah, it's unions, and it's the education school, education institutions themselves that they are relying on. Now, it sounds like we had a lot of greens and reds, but there isn't actually that many. It's just that each of these parties gets like 2% each,
right,
of the votes, right? So in total, they are at like 10% or something like that. A little bit over, I think, but there's not really that many compared to everywhere else. They're just spread out in 4 parties. So the more interesting ones are, of course, Hardline, Stram Kurs. They didn't make it at the last election, and they had just below 1%, just below 2% of the votes. And they have had so much bad PR that I don't think they're gonna make it in the next year's election.
I did get some questions in the chat, and of course we have had their leader recently in our news, Norway and in Sweden, Rasmus Paludan. How do you say the last name?
Rasmus Paludan.
Yes.
Paludan.
What do you make of him?
Well, I would actually, I think he's a great lightning rod, and he acts like a lightning rod for another party called the Nye Borgerlige, which is translated into New Right. If we had to pick a party in Denmark that would be our party, it would be New Right, and he's like a shield for those. They have roughly the same policies. They're just more polished. The language is moderated. They don't do all these activist stunts, but same policies, and they're somewhat sensible, and they come out with it sensible.
So are they any form of like traditionalists or dissidents or anything like that, or just saying that, you know, in in a mad world, the sane man, etc.?
They are libertarian in the good sense of the word, socially conservative. They generally speak out against the gay. I haven't checked what the stance is on Russia, Ukraine. I don't know where to land on that one, but they are generally speaking against EU, UN, NATO, etc.
So it's the closest thing you'd find in Denmark if you were of our sensibilities.
Yeah, it's almost good enough, right? It's acceptable, I would say, not good. Combine those two parties, Hardline and New Right, gets around 5% of the votes. So if you look at it in that way, it's 5% that we've never had. Right?
Well,
does that make sense? It's a good development in the sense that at the election before, we only had one party with 2%. Now we have two parties that combined reaches 5%, and one is acting like a lightning rod for the other one. So less hit pieces is made against the other one, which now can grow. So it's a good development, but there's a long way to go before we know before we get anywhere. Now there is two other parties which deserves a mention. So I will start with what is called Moderaterne here in Denmark, not Moderaterne in Sweden. There's only one member right now, but it's a former prime minister of Denmark. So it was just started recently, and it is started because Venstre,
is it this guy
about,
or?
Oh, wait. Let me see what has happened. No, just.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it is started because Venstre has lost its gay attitude, right? There's a new the census of the Republicans has come into the Venstre, right? And therefore the gay has lost their party in Denmark, if that makes sense.
Has there been hit pieces against him, like likening him to Trump or something?
No. He is the new representative of the gay. He's starting a new party.
Ah, okay.
Because he's been the other.
No. I was talking about the new leader of Venstre, of the left party.
Yeah. He has had his hit pieces. Yes.
Yeah.
And they try to get some.
Yeah, but sorry, that's you're talking about the moderates now.
Yeah. So yes. Yeah, so they have, or he has positioned this party to be in the middle between Socialdemokraterne and Venstre. So I think that's kind of to make both, what was it called, to put some distance between those parties and perhaps become their center party instead, and get influence that way and then swing whatever way the gay wants after that. So that's something to keep an eye out for. And the other interesting party, it's actually 12 years old or something like that. But the reason why I bring it up, because they tried to make a new party structure, and they divided their party up into 4 parts. And when you signed up as a member, you could decide where you wanted your money to go into. So you could support their green agenda, or their technology agenda, or their business agenda. And I can't remember what the last agenda was, but it was something along those lines. Now, this experiment was interesting because it actually gathered a whole lot of people, of members, which generated a lot of member fees. I can't remember how many they actually got, but it was like 20% of all political members that at that point was in one party, despite of us having like 15 or something like that. They were all in this one party because of this new way to do it, but the party crashed and burned pretty fast afterwards. So we didn't really see. I was going to
say, won't that create like power silos basically within the party, though?
Maybe it will, but I mean, the party crashed because of poor management from the leader. Okay. But the reason why I bring it up is because it might be interesting if you were to start a party to try this out. So that's why I bring it up.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting idea.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Luddic?
It's something I should look into, actually. I mean, the only thing that you have in Norway that is sort of an alternative to the standard party structure is actually Alliansen, that we talked about on the Norwegian stream, with Hans-Jørgen Lysglimt Johansen, that he sort of talks about, how his party, his new party structure is going to kind of save politics. But of course, it has him at the head anyway, so it's just not going to work, basically. So it's I mean, my attitude initially was kind of negative. I've sort of have this attitude that if you want to do politics, you do politics, and if you want to innovate, you do something around politics, something metapolitical, basically, and you try to help the political parties or affect demographics, affect ideas, and so on outside of it. But like, I don't know how much innovation you can do in terms of organizational structure that's actually going to make a difference. I've yet to see anything that's
that's
actually
what I'm
proven to work.
Because I mean, you can playing within sort of the sandbox that you've been handed isn't going to really change the system because you're still, stuck within it.
I agree. I just noted that they managed to pull in a lot of member fees, right?
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting.
It's interesting that part worked out, even if they couldn't figure out how to run a party. But yes, let's move on. I think this is pretty much the state of the political parties in Denmark. So it's time to get on to some notable people. And this is where you should bring up that picture from before. Yes. So that is Anders Fogh Rasmussen. He's the former Prime Minister of Denmark, and he went on to become the General Secretary for NATO, which is the leader of NATO. For those who are not aware, he is pretty much the Blair of Denmark. He rearranged Denmark just like Blair did. He was along the British in the first four allies.
He kind of looks like him.
Yes, and they went into Iraq, which we talked about earlier. And he was also the Prime Minister around the same time of Blair. Now he's now running a foundation. You're surprised, aren't you?
Very.
Yeah. It's operating primarily in the third world and places such as Ukraine. Is there anyone who is starting to get flashbacks here?
Okay. Are there vaccines involved at some point here as well?
Stop noticing patterns, people in chat. Stop it.
He was an advisor to Poroshenko, the first president after the coup prior to Zelensky. He is also an advisor to Citigroup, which some of you might remember. Obama filled up his cabinet with Citigroup when he was in power. So he's that kind of guy.
Pretty much just lacking like a picture of him and like Hunter Biden and Epstein, I guess.
It's coming, my friend. It's coming.
You got the bingo card.
One of the organizations he has started is the Alliance of Democratic Organizations. You might know those, but what you probably know better is the initiative that they launched shortly after, called the Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity. That was launched in 2018.
I remember that name, yeah.
Yeah. That was him. He was the guy who started it. It has been created for the sake of bolstering Western democracy against outside interfering. Also reminiscent of something, right? Now, yeah. So the first question we have to ask, who is the co-chair besides this guy on such an initiative?
On the Transatlantic Commission of Election Integrity.
Yes. Well, to find that guy, we just have to look to the recent disinformation board in the US. The new boss for that is known as Michael Chertoff. He is the co-chair of this Transatlantic Commission on Election Integrity that Anders Fogh Rasmussen set up. Now, besides that, you might ask, how many members is there in this group? Because, I mean, if it's just one out of 1,000, right, then it's one thing. But the answer is that there is 10 members. And Anders Fogh Rasmussen, Michael Chertoff, and Joe Biden himself is a member of this group of 10 people. It's a supercharge.
All of this just happens. It's just emergent behavior.
It's random. It's totally random, right? Super small, tightly organized group, which is how we know power works from elite theory, right?
Is this the cathedral I heard so much about?
This is the cathedral.
Oh yeah. This guy, we found him, guys. We found the cathedral. It's him.
Yes, it's this guy, right? He is just as close, just working a different angle than Blair. He's the same guy, just for Denmark.
I'm actually surprised you talked about him being like the Blair of Denmark, and I'm surprised that Stoltenberg Luddic hasn't gone into NGO business and wants to come back to do the monetary fund work.
Yeah, it's interesting, but now it seems like he's going to stay in this kind of NATO position.
Well, yeah, it was aptly timed. Maybe he'll just pull an FDR and be the NATO man forever now.
Yes. But yeah, guys like this, and I mean, Alexander Stubb was mentioned in the Finland stream. I've noticed him as well. Like one of these people, like him and Blair, like these are like the real defenders of the faith. The Transatlantic Alliance, like the people are actually doing a lot of the heavy lifting to keep this stuff going.
Yeah, so that is that guy, and he is, of course, the most important man of Denmark, I think. I think that's pretty safe to say. How many other guys do you know are sitting in a 10-man group with Joe Biden?
Yeah, I think his voice carries the most influence, at least in geopolitics.
Yes. So number 2 is, of course, Queen Margrethe II, the regent of Denmark. Now, I will get to why she is more important than you first imagine. She is out of the House of Glucksburg, which is a branch of the House of Oldenburg, and it's the same house that the royal family of Norway is out of. And combined, these families have relatives in nearly every royal family across Europe, but that is not all. The House of Oldenburg, meaning the house that they are part of, is around 200 members, and they own roughly half of all of the heavy industry in Sweden and North Germany, primarily in Holstein and Pomerania in Germany, which make that family one of the biggest industrial players in Northern Europe. That is not different from how the Saudi royal family, for instance, owns all of the oil in Saudi Arabia. And as we know, it's small, tight, organized minorities that matters. Well, the House of Oldenburg is such a small minority, and that makes Queen Margaret II a lot more important. And that, of course, also goes for Harald in Norway, right?
Yeah, sure. For as long as he's going to be alive, at least, I don't think he has that many years of political scheming left.
No, but it's just worth knowing that whatever happens in the social things, etc., these guys
Oh,
don't
yeah.
actually care. They're sitting on the heavy industry that we need, right? So
Now, Johannes Palaiologos in the chat says, doesn't she have kind of based opinions on immigration?
I mean, it goes up and down. I would say 1 year she says we have to stand together as Danes, and maybe we shouldn't take that many in, and blah blah blah. And next year she will say we welcome all immigrants. So yeah, she doesn't.
Fair enough.
I don't know what to think about her, to be honest. I think she just wants to be alone with her art. She doesn't want to be political in the first place. Yeah, so the last person of interest I've pulled up here is Denmark's richest man. It's Anders Holk Poulsen.
I didn't get a picture of this. I'll see if I can find him on.
He's not important. He's not important enough for a picture. But he made a clothing production company and with a store chain called Bestseller. I don't know where it's located, etc. But there's 20,000 stores worldwide, but only 2,500 of them are branded stores. So you can find his products pretty much everywhere in the West. I think he's operating in like 80 countries or something like that. And it's all the Western countries where there's money to be made. The reason why he's interesting is because he bought up a lot of land in Scotland some years ago and is today the largest landowner in Scotland. There is a lot of other people that I could bring up, of course, in Denmark, but I just feel that they're like interchangeable CEOs. That doesn't really matter.
Sure, yeah.
It's not always true, but for the most part, these are the big heads of Denmark, the way I would look if I was looking for someone who was wielding power outside of these interchangeable people. So I've just noted down what the most important businesses is and media channels, just to get an overview. The most important company is, of course, Maersk, world's largest shipping company, also involved in gas and oil extraction. It's owned by a single family, controlled by a single family, majority owned, right? There's a fun little fact, and that is during the last 100 years, Maersk have paid 1% of all Danish taxation directly, right? So 1% of all taxation in the last 100 years have been paid by Maersk. And when you account for all of the companies, etc., we're talking about 3 to 5% of all tax revenue. And when you talk about all of the subsidiaries and services that they need to hire, we're probably talking about 10 to 20% of the Danish taxation in the last 100 years have been paid by Maersk. So if you say that the Prussians were an army with a nation attached, then you can say that Denmark is a shipping company with a nation attached. Same thing, basically. So the second most important
company... in that
company...
sense, I guess Norway is an oil rig with a nation attached. So
yeah, at least now, right? Right now, that is true.
But especially right now, yeah.
Yeah. The second largest or second most important company is Novo Nordisk, that produces insulin for the American market. So we have a lot of biotech development here. And the third most important company is Lego, which produces the most advanced torture devices known to mankind. And they also run theme parks similar to Disney.
Very good.
Can I go on one of those rides to try the torture machine?
Yeah, and then media. I just want to run over this just to.
Hang on for a moment, because Spindly in the chat here commented on Anders Poulsen. He says that his children were redacted in some Muslim attacks in Sri Lanka.
Yes, it was him.
And he names him as potential ally. What do you think about
So based on his comments after that attack, I would say no, because he said we need to be friends and hold hands, etc. So
okay.
I would say no. I think he's a globalist for all intents and purposes.
I understand.
But maybe maybe the experience have given him a different view over time, because what I know about him in that regard is from his statements after the attack. But yes, it is true that there were some of his children that was killed in those Muslim attacks in was it a cathedral or something in Sri Lanka.
I mean, it's I suppose it's easy to ignore it if you can just live on your own sort of like Scottish kingdom and not have to deal with how it's affected Denmark on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. And I don't want to say something that is wrong. I can just say that his immediately statements after the event was I facepalmed when I heard him. But yeah, there's not much to say. Perhaps we should look into it just to see where he is today. But if he is somewhere close to us, then
what I can see from like a quick Google thing is that he seems to be a bit like camera shy. He doesn't really do interviews.
Yeah, that's true.
So that probably adds to a lack of information.
Yeah, I can't say, to be honest. But I can say what he said immediately afterwards, and that was not in our favor. Let's just say that. Yeah. So just to finish, because I'm so close to the finish now.
Sure. Go ahead.
There's the media. I just want to point out how it's connected, so we can understand how that is connected. One of the biggest companies is called Berlingske Media. They run 4 large newspapers in Denmark. It's owned by a Belgian company that operates in Belgium and Netherlands with the same kind of newspapers. It's like, I don't know. I don't have a good counter example. I just know the Danish one. But it's like center right-wing newspapers that they run everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's Bonnier, runs the equivalent of the Financial Times here, called Børsen.
I think we've seen that name in Finland as well.
Yes, and in Sweden.
Makes sense.
Sweden,
yeah, of course. Yeah.
Sweden company. And they probably have something similar in Norway too, but don't hang me on that. Besides that, we have Aller, which is a Danish magazine conglomerate. They own so many magazines. All the in Norway there's one called Dagbladet.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Allers, I guess that's what we refer to it as, but they own Dagbladet and Allers magazine. There's like these standard housewife type magazines with the crosswords.
They also have a lot of like minor online newspaper or publishing houses for like more specific news articles for.
Exactly, they do, and they own a shit ton of them, to be honest, all across Scandinavia. So that's a Danish company. So it's there's a lot of connections to Norway and Sweden, obviously, but it's to the point where our media is basically the same too, right? Perhaps not so much TV, but our written media are very similar.
Certainly, yes.
For TV channels, we only got 2, and they are both basically owned by the state. It's Danmarks Radio and TV2. They are set up to be in competition with each other, so we get good content for the taxpayers' dime. That's it. That's basically the state of Denmark as it is right now.
So, if you guys have any questions you want to ask Greenriver here about about Denmark and perhaps the future of Denmark. I don't know if you want to talk any about that, sort of just off the cuff. Please feel free to post them down below. We have a little bit more maybe current events we should talk about, but I also had a question from before from Bjarki. He asks if you know much about the riots that happened in Denmark in 2007 after the police closure of the Ungdomshus.
Yeah, so he says 2007, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm answering that, but I know about one set of riots in connection with Ungehuset around that time. So I assume it's that. The story is that we had a religious sect called Faderhuset that bought up property, the property Ungehuset, and then wanted to restore it into being a place for this religious sect. And they got the media whipped up a mob in the newspapers, and then there was riots in connection with getting rid of it. Now, there is some prior information that would be nice to know to why they were able to whip it up, namely that Ungehuset is it was taken while it was empty, and it should have been torn down. But then young anarchists, left-wing anarchists, took it over and made like a cultural house out of it. And that's why they were able to whip up this atmosphere against this religious sect. And even after the protest, this religious sect was just hounded around for years afterwards. They collapsed after 5 years or something like that, with just constant harassment from media and from these left-wing anarchists.
I see.
So that's the story behind it. But if we have to be honest, it was a little bit cheeky for a religious sect to take over a left-wing anarchist house and try to do something with it, right?
Well,
So
fair enough.
Maybe they had what was coming to them. Maybe they got what was coming to them. Yeah, that's
So,
what I have to say about that.
The next one up is Vingol, past panelist, of course, and friend of the channel. Did Greenriver say something earlier about the Social Democrats being caught admitting that anti-immigration is all for show? Can you expound on that? I'm not sure if there's much more to say than you already have, but...
Yeah, but they have been caught on video saying that, like, at local meetings, they were caught on videos saying that it was all for show. There has been multiple videos. It doesn't get any airtime in the press, of course. So that is true. I can see that there's more questions regarding immigration in Denmark, and let me just say, Denmark is a great. It is a great nation in terms of immigration in Europe, but it's not good enough to be among the best in Europe, right? You have to be better than that. Otherwise,
which one would be Poland?
Yeah, well, okay, that is Eastern Europe. I didn't think about those.
Sorry, fair enough.
but yes, you would have to take a stance like Poland or Hungary or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to get to that point before it's good enough, right? I'm not even sure the stance that they are at are good enough. That's the problem.
Sure.
But we are in Western Europe. We are so far away from that goal that just because Denmark is halfway there, it's still not good enough.
I'd agree that there's so many reasons why we shouldn't do it, really, and I don't have to preach to the choir really about that, but it needs to be a lot stricter, to be able to try to reverse the effects.
Yeah. So that's what I would say. But you're right about that. There is also all sorts of rules, like the refugees that came in 2015. They had to give up their valuables in order to come in.
Oh yeah,
That's
I remember that
rule.
one. Yeah.
That's a good rule, right? But
yeah,
it's just not enough, right? It's just the beginning. We have another rule. If you rob a store or a business of any kind in a ghetto area, then you get twice the penalty for robbing a store, right? That's a great rule too. But that just means that the crime goes out of the ghettos and into the rest of the city, right? So
that's an interesting incentive there.
It's still not good enough, right? And
Hey,
we have more things like that. Like, yes,
don't do crime against your own people. Go do crime against the Danish.
yeah, right. So
it's a great integration experience to try to rob ethnically Danish.
Got to bring some diversity to the other neighborhoods.
That's one of the reasons. Like, after we did the Sweden stream, and I mean, of course, I've also been fed up on this kind of Swedistan type narrative. But when I thought about it a little bit, I was almost kind of less pessimistic, because I know that the Swedish immigration, I mean, it's there, it's destructive, but there has been such an amount of white flight out of those areas, and most of these immigrant communities are concentrated in the satellite cities that are kind of away from where the ethnical Swedes live. So I mean, at one
all
point,
the NIMBYs,
yes, at one point it's just going to become so painful that either you have to use like forced integration or you have to use forced removal, basically. So I think they're a lot closer to having to take one of those hard decisions, instead of actually succeeding with integration and then just having the bloodline diluted 5% every 30 years or something. That seems to be the alternative. So it might be like a weird take, but that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I mean, one of the small positive things I've been thinking about is that if the worst should happen, then Sweden will be a caliphate first, right? So my ancient blood enemies will die first. That's the only positive I've seen.
As long as Sweden gets it, yeah.
yeah, then it's okay. But yeah, I think you're right about that.
Well, sure, it's a strange world we live in, where that's an actually a preferable option. I mean, obviously we don't want it. I just have had, like, recently I've had like weird, like, sad boy hours about driving past like a McDonald's at 2 a.m. and there's this, he might even be second generation immigrant, who's like working this shitty part-time job at 2 a.m. because some Norwegian guy wants a burger. I mean, in like a weird sort of spiritual perspective, I think everyone would be happier if they just lived where their people are, in that sense, and built their own nation over time, instead of 100%. This like deracinated global homo thing we have going on now, of course.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement there. But so yes, we can talk about how the immigration rules in Denmark are good, and yes, they are good, but they're not good enough. That's really the key takeaway about immigration. It's not good enough, and then you have players or actors like the social democrats that are just lying about what they're doing, right? I mean,
yeah, you are totally right. And I mean, of course, they're good enough from this kind of like liberal Con Inc. perspective, like this kind of liberal conservative, the values are what matters and the integration is what matters, and like the West is the best. And from that perspective, it's probably good enough. But the way we think in the kind of more dissident sphere, it's of course not even close. I mean, that's why I said that Sweden is almost preferable, because they've kind of reached almost this kind of apartheid state quicker. From my perspective, I don't want it to sort of be diluted, have my population be diluted 5% every 30 years until it's like Brazil. Basically, it would be better if it's just like, okay, we just draw a line here, and we have to just recognize this as a problem. Like, this is an irreconcilable differences, and we can make decisions on that basis. The mistakes are made. We just have to live in reality.
Yeah. So I was asked about the future of Denmark, and there was another one who asked about the possibility of Denmark leaving the EU. So after the Ukraine war, I can say there's zero chance of that. We're not leaving the EU. That's 100% sure now. We are going... No, I actually think we just had an election. I didn't even bother going.
I mean, if I was conspiratorially minded, I think I'd say that a lot of the blue and white thing, the blue and yellow thing, has been capitalized very heavily to sort of crush down on any post-Brexit sentiments that may exist in Europe.
That and put a wedge in between Europe and Russia, without a doubt.
Well, of course, yes. I mean, to the point where we're willing to back out of the Nord Stream pipeline and basically toss billions down the drain. It's going to be a hard couple of years. Because of those things.
Yeah. So regarding the future of Denmark, well, I see us sliding more and more towards... that's perhaps the thing that people don't really understand about Scandinavia in general, right? Especially those from outside of Scandinavia, we have had the Klaus Schwab Industrial Revolution since the 00s. We are just 20 years ahead of you, effectively, in terms of how we run our industries, etc. So we're just going to slide further down that scale, and that's the future for Denmark. There might be a little less brown people around, but that doesn't make it better in any way.
Yeah, we're still going to own nothing and be happy.
Yeah, and we're going to be a part of the EU while be owning nothing, right? So that's the future for Denmark. There's nothing here. There's nothing in anything.
Well,
honestly, there's nothing here. If I have to be honest, there's nothing here left, right? And there's not going to be any change either. The only way that we can do something about it is by building a proper dissident group in Scandinavia and start exercising some influence through organized minorities, right? That's how it works.
Yeah.
And we are not going to do anything in time for 2060 or something like that. We aren't going to be ready. It's
going to be a long one because it's not that there are, I mean, to the point where, I mean, it's such a small minority to begin with. I mean, a lot of the people I listen to end up being from Britain, but it seems that, because the population numbers are larger, the amount of people that end up in dissident spheres are naturally bigger, and you have to sort of hit like a core of a certain number of people before you can start exercising an influence, and building that up is going to take a longer time because there's less people around, of course.
Yeah, I can actually talk a little bit about that because I have access to stats from all sorts of places because of the work I've been doing for the dissident right. So, for instance, I run a network of meetups. There is now about 3,000 people in it. It's called Basket Weaving. I don't run it on a daily basis, but I was one of those who set it up to begin with, and I can see on the stats there that the two primary places is UK, US, but the three areas in growth are Scandinavia, it's Germany, and it's Australia. Those are the three key areas. So we're going to be among the 5 first areas, I think, in terms of getting our own dissident.
That's interesting. That's good news then.
Yeah. So in that regard, I can see Scandinavia is starting to grow, and that's
I'll
also
say in my own experience too. You know, it's from doing videos and stuff like that. I've been getting comments and direct messages from a lot of people saying that, you know, oh wow, I'm so happy to have found like a Scandinavian or specifically a Norwegian content creator in the dissident sphere, because I felt, you know, I'm just so alone really. Not of course personally, but politically or philosophically, they feel very alone in the sphere. So there seems to be a need for a community for this.
It's definitely a growing market. That's at least my impression. That's where you want to be.
Merchant talk, yeah.
And for all of you dissidents out there, the moment we can get Scolding's account events to Scandinavia, we're gonna do it. Don't worry about it. We just have to grow our numbers to that point where we can bring it there. But I'm definitely gonna bring it there.
Mm-hmm.
For sure. We just need the numbers, and we aren't there yet. Maybe next year, maybe the year afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about this, and you said we're not going to be ready by 2060, so don't expect, you know, an event by the end of this year. That's we have to think a little bit further ahead and take this one step at a time. But
correctly, yes.
Something you can do is obviously check out basket weaving, the Skilding's website, and also subscribe to this channel and like and comment the video to spread the message. And before you know it, we'll have something.
Yeah, and one of your commenters said Skilding's equals Skjolunga, and he is correct. That is an old Danish king, so we have already subverted the Anglos.
It's already happened, yeah, and they have a hard time pronouncing it as well, which I always find funny.
Yes, it's perfect. Yeah, well, that's... Oh, yeah.
We have some questions here from chat that has been popping up as we go, and John McNamara has a very important, and he says that it's of vital importance to the future of Western civilization, and that's a question where he said that he's asked out a Danish girl. Is there anything he should know about them?
Are you pure, mate? Are you pure? That's my question. I need that answer first.
All right, John McNamara, are you pure? So, didn't Denmark start deporting refugees recently based on their temporary status? Again, we hit on this a little bit, but you might be able to clear up the question at least.
I don't know if recently, but I mean, this is just like the US where they say they will do X or Y or Z. Yeah. And
you deport 5 and then you let in 100.
Yeah, let's look at it in 3 years and see what that policy have actually done.
Yep. Let's see here. More talking about Skildings and Canute. You talk about Canute. I assume you mean the name Canute. I always have a fun time because I try to anglify or Americanize my pronouncements just for the ease of the listeners, and referencing Knut Hamsun is always funny. To try to get that sort of get all of those syllables out correctly in a way that sounds good. Now, John McNamara has said that he's 100% Irish. There has to be some Vikings back in the family tree somewhere.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That doesn't work.
Well, there's your answer, John. I'm sorry. Maybe you can lure her over to Ireland. I guess that's the only option you have. Now, we had one more topic on the current events thing. I'm not sure if you have more time, Greenriver.
No, it would actually be pretty good if I could leave around now.
Okay, well, that's fine.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks.
for coming and talking to us about Denmark, and I hope all of you in the chat got to learn something more about Denmark as well. We'll stick around for a little bit more and talk about, I guess we'll talk about Sweden Gate or something, Luddic.
Yes. So yeah, again, thanks for me as well to Jay Greenriver. This was quite enjoyable. So
Yeah.
I was thinking that I was going to ask you about the connection between the Danish Freemasonry and the Supreme Court, which is a sort of video that I just dropped in on Odyssey at one point. But we could pick that up as a later thing. I just thought it was an interesting video. I don't know if you have any opinions on like the Danish Freemasons.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on them outside the interactions I've had with members of it, and it seems to me that it is just a business network, to be honest, that are building trust through these things. But I may be wrong on that. But if you throw the video to me, I would gladly take a look at it.
Yeah, I think it's in the private chats there.
Okay, all right. Then I will save it and then watch it at a later point. Yeah, I would just like to thank you for letting me on and talk about one of my absolute favorite topics, Denmark.
Of course,
And
anytime.
yeah, if you need me another time, I can probably find my time to find some time to come on board again. So thanks for this time and see you later.
All right. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Take care. Now I'm just going to real quick fix my audio for a second.
Actually, I'm not really that caught up on the Sweden Gate thing. Is there some relevant article that I should read? I should check out some of the news.
I have an article here that explains the entire thing, really. So we can use that as a guide. Now, John McNamara says that he'll impress her with his knowledge of Danish politics and media outlets. I bet you will. And Godspeed to you. As a Norwegian, I don't care if you're Irish, as long as it's the Danish girls you go after. That's fine.
Yeah, I made a comment on Danish women on one of the previous streams. I'm not going to repeat it, but yeah.
Let's see here. What is Sweden Gate? Now, I'm sure a lot of you people in the chat know what this is already, but just for posterity, we'll go through what the idea here is. So Sweden Gate is something that went a bit viral on Twitter over the past couple of days, and it originated from a tweet about from a subreddit where someone asked, oh, I did not open that correctly. That's the wrong bookmark. Here we go. Okay. What is the weirdest thing you had to do at someone else's house because of their culture or religion? And then the top comment here is, I remember going to my Swedish friend's house, and while we were playing in his room, his mom yelled that dinner was ready. And check this, he told me to wait in his room while they ate. That shit was fucking wild. And then a guy adds on to it about sleeping over at a friend's house, and after about 15 minutes of waiting upstairs for his friend, he goes downstairs to see them eating breakfast. The second one, I think, is a little bit weird. But the first one is straight up just Nordic culture, I think. We talked a bit about this before the stream started, at least me and Greenriver did, and the norm growing up was that usually mom wanted you back home to eat dinner, so unless it was, you know, something you got explicit permission for, or that, you know, maybe your friend asked his mom if there was enough food for you to eat as well, the assumption was that, you know, you eat at your home and I'll eat at mine.
This is actually really interesting because a lot of the friends that I had growing up were sort of connections from my parents who were actually either American or British, and they didn't have this stuff. So they've always had like spare food, or I've been invited to spare food. Sometimes I've been a little bit skittish about eating at other people's homes, but this is actually
I'm not saying it
interesting.
didn't happen. It's just, the norm, like the assumption was usually that, your family wanted you home for dinner. So unless, it was like something that, like I had, like my friend could ask his mom, like, hey, can Walrus eat with us today? And they'll say, yeah, sure. He just needs to check with his mom, right? And I had to like phone my mom or something and tell her that I'm going to be eating there, and then she had to okay it. So this this is something that I think, and Greenriver said that as well. This is just how things are.
This is interesting stuff.
And John McNamara says that this seems really autistic. It's the opposite of Irish and Med culture. I agree. This is very opposite of like more quote unquote warmer cultures, where there's usually more than enough food, and you like it's an insult to not stay over for dinner. But it's also, it goes together with the whole thing of like showing up unannounced, like, because if it was a planned thing, like, no problem, there'll be more than enough food, and you're welcome to come, but it needs to be a planned thing. Like if you're just hanging out, it's not necessarily expected. What do you think, Luddic?
No, I've seen the tendency. It's just like the circles that I've been in. It's been quite the obvious. It's that you were sort of shamed if you didn't have food,
right?
But it does sort of confirm that there's some I've not. My family was not middle class Norwegian, so to speak. And like Norway is mostly a sort of middle class nation, the way I see it, especially after they exported all of the heavy industry, like in the 80s. I would say like maybe like 80 to 70% of Norway could be considered sort of middle class.
Oh, I'd agree.
Been more of like the sort of working class circles, whereas like my, connected to like the sort of working class, more sort of Christian families, where like they would know people who had moved there from other countries, and they were connected to more of these international networks, and that was always the norm that you would provide. You would always have extra food, basically. But it's interesting for me because I've sort of been a little bit of an outsider to the kind of Norwegian middle classness. I didn't know that this was a part of their their customs.
I mean, what do you mean to give you or to not give you food?
To not give food, yes.
Okay. Would you? Are you implying here that you were at a higher or lower class?
No, at a lower.
Do you want to answer that?
Lower, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Most definitely not ashamed of that. Sort of a like very kind of like working class. Well, not in the sense that you're super poor, but in the sense that
sure.
The family that I come from, like they're not formally educated. Like you had people who were like sort of hobby engineers and hobby mechanics and stuff. We're doing competitions, but generally they didn't have jobs that required you to have a university education.
Mm-hmm.
So I think some of that stuff was kind of lost on them, honestly. And like going to school, I've always been trying to kind of like pierce some of this Norwegian middle class culture. And this is weird because now this is like becoming about me, and I didn't want it. I didn't really want.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
turn out that way. But I mean. It's a funny discussion anyway. I mean, I'm going to be having my kids of my own, and then this is something I'm going to encounter, so it's good for me to be prepared at least.
I don't know how it is today, like, and I don't think I would, like, I usually end up making enough food that I wouldn't really care if my kids ended up having friends over and they wanted food. Obviously not. I think I have been influenced more than enough by the meds, and my father, who's a very, very much a med head in that sense. He spent quite a few years around the Mediterranean working. So, so I certainly wouldn't act like that, but I can see why. Like I can see I remember how the assumptions works when I was young, and it's not that they don't want to give you food. It's more that dinner is something you're supposed to share with your family, and unless something else is, explicitly stated, that's what you do. Now, someone made this graph trying to look into this, and here's the likelihood of someone giving you food when you're a guest at someone's house, and I think that's like the translation thing here, because being a guest at someone's house is different. Like what I would consider a guest, someone I invite over, right? That's what I'm saying. There's not going to be a lack of food if I invite someone over, right? But it has to be a planned thing. If you just show up at my house, I can't guarantee that I have food.
Is there some qualifier here? Because usually you put out some cookies and coffee or some snack that you have.
Well, sure. If I have something, I'm gonna be be polite and offer you a coffee, right?
Yes.
But I shop dinner for my family, right? I don't shop for my family plus whoever shows up at my door, because that's rude.
The thing is that, like, as I've been growing up, there's been less of these unannounced visits simply because of the cell phone and the computer communication. So some of that culture existed. I remember like going along with my dad, and he would just travel around places and visit people that he knew from his youth and stuff like that. And I thought it was a bit awkward at the time. I was just like, I wasn't really comfortable with it. But as I've gotten older, I've sort of realized that like this was kind of a dying breed even at the time. This is something.
Well, sure, and I'm not saying like one of them is good and the other is bad, right? I'm not making a value judgment here. I'm just trying to explain. Yes. I think what I think is my Norwegian brain answer to these questions. So
it's probably you're probably 100% correct. It's just that, as I've been saying, I've been kind of like standing outside of the Norwegian middle class stuff, and there's for me that's almost kind of an integration process.
Sure. It's Burkhardt says here. Sorry.
Culture and planning. So let's look at these countries. So you have Sweden, Norway, Finland, and
yes,
this.
I'll briefly just finish, because I my point there is that as a guest, I think this is an unannounced guest.
Okay.
I think that's the sort of the key cultural misunderstanding here, right? If you, as my buddy Luddic, are just coming over to hang out, there won't be an expectation of me to make dinner for you, right? But in a lot of other cultures, that would be an expectation.
You see, what I have experienced with is then this kind of like splitting the bill thing.
Sure,
that's more common in Norway, and we have the infrastructure put in place to do that with this kind of Norwegian Vipps Venmo stuff. And like if you go to a place to eat in Norway and you order some food, then it's just kind of expected that everybody, like, they'll send you a request for like a portion, your quarter of the meal, which is not as common in other places. Like they would just the host will just pay for the entire meal, and they expect you to do the same when you get over to their place. So I guess that's a part of that culture.
And it goes over to other things as well. I don't know if the article here gets into it, but there was this like this activist immigrant woman in Sweden was like doing what's it called, like Twitter Spaces, like where you have like Discord calls but on Twitter, with like rooms people can join and talk. And they were talking about how like one big like cultural shock for them was if you go to parties and you bring booze, like everyone brings their own booze and they're very protective of their own alcohol.
That's also true.
That's also very true. I mean, first of all, because it's fucking expensive, because it's monopolized by the state, right?
Yes.
But second of all, because it's mine. I brought it. It's don't hands off my vodka. That doesn't mean we don't share, right?
Well,
I mean, if you ask me, can I get a shot of your vodka? I'm going to say sure, right?
The tip
but you bring
that
your
I have
own
for people
beer.
is that if you either arrive late or you're willing to go sober a little bit when people get tipsy, they're more interested in sharing. Or, I mean, they're going to be used to using the common fridge anyway, and people get so drunk at one point that they don't notice what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to steal, you can steal.
Slip yourself a Tuborg or something without anybody noticing. Of course, I don't recommend that. I'm just saying theoretically you could. You could do
Yeah.
this.
No, yeah, I've probably drank a couple of beers that weren't mine throughout my years, right? Because at some point you just go and grab something, right? But
But I've also realized that you're supposed to, like, even though you bring your own drinks, I mean, if there's anything left, you're supposed to leave that in the fridge of the host.
yeah.
So that's also expected, something I didn't know.
It's this weird, like, and I'm gonna call it like the Longhouse culture, in a sense, where someone invites people over for an event. You invite people over for a good time, and that's sort of like tribute to the host, in a sense, that's left over, and that's more the way we do things. We don't just spontaneously show up at other people's houses. We create happenings and events, and within that organized space, we are very sharing, right? We're very I mean, it's not that we don't give people food, obviously. It's just that it has to happen in the correct order.
And people are very sus about this kind of spontaneity and this sort of show-uppiness.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense, because if you live on a farm and you see like other people like 2 times a year, I get it, right?
Yes.
You have to be a bit
but at the same time, I mean, I have read about, like, when I was talking about the Norwegian vagabond culture, and like when people lived on these larger farms, there was more of a culture of just accepting vagabonds.
Well, sure, but usually they did some work, so I feel like that's it's a bit of a different sort of arrangement. Oh, and Burkhall says that don't forget that the host's loot of the huge bottle return receipt. Yep, that'll pay for the pizza the day after. Some people take them with them back home, which I've always think is a bit weird, but again, I understand because of the price.
Yeah, but I think from my understanding, like, the good etiquette is to leave it.
Yeah, it is.
I
have seen a version of this that is like, instead of will you receive food as a guest, it's like, will you be recruited into the Varangian Guard? And the red ones are like, will very likely be part of the raiding party.
I mean, like, not every country has this kind of security bottle system where you give the bottles back to the store and you get a certain amount of your money back. And that's the sort of a problem with foreigners that I've had, like, say, Spaniards or people from Asia, where, like, we lived in communal spaces, and there's been a kind of store up of all of these empty bottles. That's probably worth like 1,000 Norwegian kroners, and they've just like taken it and thrown it in the trash because they didn't realize that it was money.
Jesus. Yeah, I mean, that's what you do, right? I remember that from studying. You gather up all the, or from like living with like other students. We like the day after the party, we'd gather up all the bottles, and then we'd, as you said, we'd go get the money back, and then we'd buy pizza for it, and nurse the hangovers.
Yeah, or like if you have some shared living expenses, it's also nice to cover that with the bottle money.
Of course, yes. Some of these memes are pretty good, though. About it.
The money.
Probably have a friend say, yeah, but this one gotta stay prepped if you're gonna hang out with the Swedish friends. On Sweden Gate, when I was about 7, I had lunch at my friend's house, and my grandma called her parents and tried to pay for it. This is, I'm assuming that this person like had a Swedish friend or something. I don't know. Yeah, bringing your own sheets and towels when you get invited to spend the night. That's something I've done.
Yeah, that's also a thing that I had to learn the hard way myself, that you're supposed to bring.
Oh yeah.
Bring your own sheets and towels.
Yeah.
So I've sometimes ended up sleeping in my clothes because I forgot.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Oh, here it is. See, the Swedish thinking goes like this. The other child or the other family may have plans for another kind of dinner, and you wouldn't want to ruin the routine or the preparations. I don't think it's anything to do with not wanting to feed the other child because it costs money or anything like that. It's more to do with tradition and wanting to eat with your own family. So backing up my claims here. So this turned into a whole, like, I mean, the race grifters got in on this, and a bunch of like immigrants to Sweden had like a big big thing about like how this is, you know, we have to fight for food in Sweden, and you know everything is awful, and my stance is pretty much, well, if you're not gonna, you know, if this culture that you've moved into is so harsh, you should probably just leave.
It doesn't sound like a big problem to adjust to. You know, you could probably adjust to this as soon as you know. I think it's like maybe one awkward encounter, and then it's okay. That's how we do it.
Yeah. But again, you know, this was like professional race grifters doing their thing. It's not something. I mean, really, it's kind of boring, but it's a bit fun to meme about the Scandies.
Yeah, it's interesting to see how people react to that. I mean, people usually have like a very good impression, I think, of Scandinavians. You don't get that much shit, you know, in these international forums. So it's funny once it happens.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're about 2.5 hours in. I think, unless there's any more questions or memes being posted in the chat, I think it's a good time to end the stream. Again, remember, next week is a meme review. I'm probably going to be overly prepared. I think I've been working on like a mental map of how I'm going to rate memes past week, like on the sort of like the irony to the absurdism scales, and what makes a good meme and what makes a bad meme, and why do we not like the lefty memes, and why are they always so full of words, etc.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was thinking about if we're going to do the review, how the format, you know, if we're going to do ratings, or like some of the people I've seen on YouTube, they just like sit and laugh. They just go through a slideshow and they laugh at it.
Yeah, no, I think I've landed on that. We have to do like at least like, for posterity's sake, give them a 1 to 10 scoring or something.
Yeah, like so they get a based score, and they get like a subversion score, a funny score.
Sure, maybe,
some sort of effort score or something.
Yeah. Okay, guys, thank you for watching, and yeah, per girl meme review. Is that that's what's his name? I'm so bad with names. PewDiePie, I think.
Who's this guy?
Yeah.
Is that does he do the clap?
He does the clap, I think. At least from the memes I've seen, he does the clap. I don't think I've seen a lot of PewDiePie at all, really.
It's been a while.
Anyway, Walrus, could you say something about how the Longhouse Matrix thing works? I don't know what to tell you. You click the link and you'll get an invitation. If you have trouble with setting up Matrix, you should seek out the Shielding's website. You should be able to join like either a Discord group there, or get more information about how you can set up Matrix. But it shouldn't be that hard.
It's just a chat application.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a Slack chat or something.
It's like Slack, or it's like Discord or something like that. It's just an alternative, and it's encrypted, so you can post spicy stuff. Okay, so thank you guys for watching. Tune in next time for the funny meme review stream. I'll see you all then.